Hey friends, Chris here, and today I'm playing through a TopHat Rialto Reverb lent to me by a friend, and I had to share this with you because it's one of the greatest sounding amps I've ever played through. It's absolutely spectacular. So I'm going to share a little bit of what it does, how it works, and also just a little of my experience with TopHat because I've been playing TopHat amps for quite a while now. So I hope you enjoy. So I wanted to get into a little bit about this amp, its features. There is another video which the designer, Gerhard, has done, and it's up on YouTube. Unfortunately, it's not mic'd up, so the sound isn't really great, but when you listen to him talk about it and what it can do, it's pretty amazing. So this amp, should be pretty apparent that it's based off of a Fender Princeton, actually several Fender Princetons, because it can kind of do the range of the original Brownface, and the Blackface amps. Also can kind of get some Tweed vibes in there because of some of the features. And so let's talk about those for just a second. Now, starting with the cabinet, as you know, Fenders primarily have used pine. The old Princetons were pine. I have had a number of old Princetons. In fact, I probably have a photo of it for you. Both non-reverb and reverbs, and have played a number of vintage ones. Of course, the cabinets are pine, and they're great sounding little amps, but if you push them too hard, they don't, they get a little bit loose in the low end, and because the cabinets are kind of small, you don't get quite the bigness of the tone, but for a recording situation, they're absolutely wonderful. In fact, that's pretty much my favorite clean tone is from a Princeton. The cabinet, of course, is a little bit taller, and it houses a Celestion Vintage 30, which is one of my favorite speakers, and I have been using them with Fender amps for a long time. I just think it makes a great pairing. I first did it with an old 66 Bandmaster that was one of my first amps, and I've always thought it was a great combination. Of course, Brian Setzer does the same thing with his blonde Bassmans. And I like the combination of it. I've really liked Celestion speakers with Fender type amps to bring the mids forward a little bit. The cabinet is not pine like you usually find on older Fenders. Pine can get a little bit loose sounding. Of course, the Princeton Reverbs have a very small cabinet, smaller than this. So you're kind of dealing with that. Now in the recording studio, they, when at the right volume, they can just sound sublime. Absolutely wonderful sounding clean tone. Instead of doing pine, Brian opted for birch, which is more like what Marshall would use and what TopHat uses in all their other cabinets, and I found it to be a great combination for this. If you're thinking Princeton Reverb and a little, tiny low volume amp, this can actually push quite a bit harder. It's louder than my vintage Princeton Reverb. So that's it cabinet-wise. Of course, the tube complement, two 6v6s, some 12AX7s, and it's got a tube rectifier, a GZ34. And you'll notice that there's a few more controls than a regular Princeton Reverb. Now, what has been omitted on this is the tremolo, but you gain a few other features that make it a nice trade. So let me just start. After the input, you have a gain switch for high or low, controlling the gain on the front end. By high gain, we just mean more. It's not, don't think like dual rectifier or anything. This is a pretty clean amp. It's got a brite switch, so neutral to the left is more of a Fender-y brite sound. To the right's more of a Marshall. It actually adds a lot of treble to pass the volume knob there. It's got an EQ bypass. So you can remove the tone stack from the signal path, and I'll give you quite a bit of gain boost on it. Treble and bass, of course, just like on a Princeton, but this mid-range control has been added, and it is really, really great sound. I mean, you can get those kind of twin reverb sounds if you bring it way down. It'll get that nice kind of sucked out tone, almost like a direct to the board tone. But then around 5 or so, you're kind of in Princeton territory, which is great, and that's usually where I've been having it on here. And then if you push it up, you can push into Tweed and even kind of Marshall-y sounds because it's such a powerful mid-range. Now, after the tone controls, you have the reverb controls, a switch and 2 knobs, which is a little more than a vintage Princeton would have. There's the switch, which is a bypass for the reverb, and again, the reverb kind of brings the gain down. So if you bypass that, you can push a little bit harder on the end of the amp. It has a send and return knobs, and so the send is how much level is going to the tank. It'll also affect how splashy and how much decay the reverb has, and then as well as affect the overall level coming out of it. But the overall level is governed by the return, and so that's where it's going to mix into the dry signal. And so with that, it's a very versatile reverb. You can have it really wet but very short, or you could do something like, pull it back like where I have it now, where it's pretty long sounding, but it's not too overwhelming in the mix, and it's a fantastic sounding reverb too. So I gotta say, it sounds better than my Princeton does. So that's it as far as controls go. And let's go through some of the modes, because as you change these modes, it'll evoke different eras of the Princeton, from cleaner to dirtier. And so perhaps let's start with a cleaner mode here. And so actually the Princeton non-reverb, like a Blackface non-reverb, we'd start by bypassing the reverb because it wouldn't have that. Have EQ engaged, no brite on, and then we'll switch it to low gain here. And so this is a pretty low gain arrangement, and we basically have the tone. So I had a wonderful 1965 Princeton non-reverb and a 68 or 9, I can't remember. And they're wonderful, clean sounding amps, but they don't overdrive very much. So even when you have the volume up pretty high, it stays pretty clean. So also I'll compensate for the volume in post. So you should be hearing everything pretty much the same volume, but it's changing a lot in the room for me. Now the other thing is that as you're hearing me talk, I kill everything when this starts playing. I do all those edits by hand, so I'm sure that all you're hearing when you hear the guitar is just what's coming off of the speaker through the SM58 into my Focusrite interface into Logic. And so you're just hearing the pure signal of it when I play and when I stop talking. So even when we turn it up here, I mean, we can get it pretty high, and with this non-reverb arrangement, it stays very clean. With a humbucker, it would just be beginning to distort, but this is pretty much all the way up, and with a Strat, you're just hearing that clean, spanky tone there. All right, let's try a different variation of this. Let's try the Princeton Reverb, which is what you heard on the beginning of the video. So I'm going to kick in the reverb. Even if we have the reverb all the way off here, we're going to go to high gain, bypassed, and the EQ engaged. And let's bring the volume back here to up there. Now here on the Princeton is usually where it would be getting a little bit flubby, like it sounds great, but just starting to lose that bottom end, but you'll hear this stays together really nicely. This mode is really a perfect pedal platform. Use your overdrive pedals for it, and just let this be the kind of clean tone. Now, if you want to have it break up a little bit, you know, push it a little bit harder here. We can add a little bit of reverb to it. So let me demonstrate the reverb. High return, low send. It's got a lot of reverb for being such a small cabinet. It's well designed. And not to confuse people, but I mean, it's got a smaller reverb tank because it's not Fender twin size, but everything in the circuit has been optimized for that good reverb tone. So as you can see, you can get pretty wet. Okay, so that's kind of the Princeton reverb tone. Now we could go a little bit earlier in Princeton history, so we're going to drop this down to low gain. We're going to bypass the EQ and bypass the reverb here. I'm going to start this back a little bit. So the tone that we're hearing there is a lot like a Brownface Princeton. Notice that there's really an increased mid-range. It's really bold sounding. So the brite switch can bring in a little bit of highs. If we go into the other mode, we've got the Telecaster here, still in the kind of brown Princeton type settings here, and also the brite switch is engaged kind of on the Marshall side, so it's really pushing the high end. Let's take that off actually and just push the volume up a bit and it'll get nice and fat sounding. Goes a lot further than what a Princeton would do. So also let's do this. We're going to switch to high gain mode here. Bypassed EQ, bypassed reverb, and this is a really high gain mode. Only about 3 on the volume. That sounds good. Okay, let's go. What do we got here? Okay, another mode that I like would be high gain on the front end, high gain on the end, but having the EQ engaged, it'll give you a little more versatility, but it'll still give you quite a bit of drive if you're using this not as a pedal platform, but as its own source of overdrive. By the way, this mid-range control is really powerful, so again, if you could suck it out here. Or push it really hard. And if you do push the bass, it's going to stay together a lot better than a Princeton. Alright, so back with my 1980 Tokai Reborn Old, great sounding 58 style Les Paul, PF style pickups, vintage wiring, got a Faber tailpiece on here, and let's just hear this amp with some humbuckers. I'm going to start with the neck pickup rolled down a bit. Just run through some various combinations here. Really pushes it nicely. So just one more setting here. I've got high gain, brite off, EQ off, and reverb off. So I've brought it back into Princeton Reverb land here with the Les Paul. We've got it up pretty high in volume. So I've been playing TopHat amps for about 17 or 18 years. My first experience with TopHat amps came in about, I don't know, 97 or 98 or so. And a really good friend of mine, a mentor, well known in the TopHat circles, Tavo Vega, he had traded an amp, I believe, for a Club Royale, which is like the 15-watt, very voxy sound. And I couldn't believe he had done that at the time, and now I understand. But I did like the sound of that, and over the next 5 years, I had played a number of TopHats. They had a wide distribution in the area. And actually, TopHat's former location was in Anaheim, California. And so it was within driving distance for me, and I was able to go by the shop. Now, in about 2003 or 4, I bought my first one, which was a Club Deluxe, which is kind of a voxy front end with a Tweed-like power amp, 6V6s. And when I had received it, it had a brite cap on the volume, and it was a little bit bright, and I just was kind of wondering if I could tweak it a little bit. And before I opened it up, it was before I had done a whole lot of amp modding and amp fixing. So being that Brian was local, Brian Gerhard, again, the owner of TopHat, the designer, I dropped by the shop. Here I am, guy in my 20s, a nobody, gone back to school, I'm working, playing guitar, and say, hey, I've got this amp, I really like it, but I think it's just like killing me on the top end, but I really like the character of it. What can we do about this? Because I don't want to sell it. There's something here that I really like. It's like, yeah, no problem. So we walked through the shop, and they had the office, and then several people building the amplifiers. One of them was a gal named Tui who used to work for Matchless Amplifiers, and so on a lot of the TopHats that I've had her name in there. They had their tech guy, and then Brian took me back to this room in the back, sound room, and so I set up, here, play, let me hear what your style is, what you do, what you like. I played it, had one of my guitars with me, and okay, I think, yeah, we're going to do this, and we had talked about it, and then he had the tech guy pop it open, yeah, and just tuned it to me. And that's the kind of experiences that most of us don't get to have, not being whatever, famous musicians. But I really appreciated the time that he took to do that with me and to really dial it in. And as a consequence of it, to have somebody that not only makes great products, but they want to take care of you too. Like now, I mean, I've been a TopHat user ever since, and most of my gigs have been done with TopHats, some with some vintage Fenders that I've had along the way, but most of my gigs have been done with small ones with the Club Deluxe, and the big, more rock stuff have been done with an Amplexador. I've had several Amplexadors, I think 2 Amplexadors, 3 Club Deluxes, a very interesting purple King Royale. What else have I had? The ones that I have right now is one of the Club Deluxes and 1 Amplexador. Oh, 2 Ambassadors. This is my Amplexador, which came in a head, and behind me I have the 212 closed back cab, but I have it mounted in a 212 kind of blues breaker style cabinet for easy transportation. But of course, right now we're not able to gig too much, so I'm really looking forward to getting back and using these a lot more again. So that's really it. I'm really impressed with it. I wish I had the money right now to get one of these. This is like #1 on my guitar buying list. This one, as I said, is my buddy's, and I'm really grateful to Mark for letting me borrow this, and really jealous that it's his. And we've just really enjoyed TopHats. Not long after I got mine, he started getting TopHats, and he's had a bunch of them, and some of the models that I haven't had, like the Sweet 16. Oh, I also had a T50, one of the early, before the Amplexadors. And a Portly Cadet. Yeah, I mean, I've just been through a lot of them, and I really enjoy them. And just wanted to thank, again, Brian Gerhard for the wonderful amps, also taking care of me back in the day. I wish he wasn't on the East Coast and I could drop into the shop and chat. And But really appreciated that experience, and again, thank you to Tavo, who got me onto TopHat amps amidst everything else he did in my life. I really appreciate that. So hope you enjoyed the video. I have other guitar videos, my pedal board, setup, studio tour, my vintage Standell and Framus, like playing these 1960s instruments. There's an interesting story behind that. Also quite a few with plugins like Valhalla Supermassive on guitar, Valhalla Delay. But most of my channel is synthesizers. That's what I do for a living, selling synthesizer presets. So to have some feedback, to talk and chat with people about this great gear that we use, that's what keeps me going. So please do comment and give it a like if you feel led. But yeah, just appreciate that, and we'll talk to you next time.